Hey everybody, and welcome back to a video as I actually welcome myself back to the United States in general. I was just out there at the Celebrational and the Calling out in Queenstown and had a fantastic time, and we're back with a lot of hot brews for Levia. So this video is going to be all about kind of the day one experiments that I've been doing with Levia, and I know I say day zero, but we're already about 40 games in or so, and I've got a deck that is performing really well and doing some really exciting things with the new cards. But before we get to that, just wanted to let you know there actually are new sleeves available for the League of Levia. We change up the print run every time, so if you want to get your hands on these, please just shoot me a message on Discord, Twitter, or somewhere like that, so I can go ahead and get these out to people who want them. So with a new Levia deck tech comes new Levia bling. So these were actually made by a friend of mine, Shaky Eagle, on Discord, who reached out to hook me up with these incredible, had them in the wrong order, basically extended art Levia mandible claws, all in this beautiful shadow border. So we are rocking a mandible claw list for today. I couldn't quite figure out Hexagore brews this early, but in the League of Levia Discord, there are some people working on it. But yes, this is still primarily a mandible claws build. Now, in kind of the inventory slots, as they're called, of course, you want the Demi Hero, which you'll see some of the changes that I've made in the list, but we're actually truly playing on both axes, redeemed or consumed in this deck. Primarily into decks that are racing you. If you can get off this flip, then your value is just basically unbound. And then redeemed kind of as a stopgap between ending the game before you kill yourself to blood debt, which is not something that's like obviously ever part of the plan, but something that can happen based on like maybe some weird pitching or just graveyard states, things like that. Then we've got new tokens that we need to get a hold of. You see these cold foils from that prize wall, that's right. Agility and might. Might tokens really come into effect because of a new arm piece, Apex Bonebreaker. My spoiler video, if you saw the Lego stop animation I did, that's really where we're going to be generating these. And then agility because of some of the new cards we're adding to the main deck, along with the Quicken and the Blasmo token, as always. Now, the equipment suite itself got insanely tanky these days, and that's because we can equip a new arms piece in this Apex Bonebreaker. And Apex Bonebreaker is absolutely fantastic. It's basically 5 value on an armor piece now. Not only is it temper, so you're going to block 2, then 1, you also get that might token whenever you block with it plus a 6, right? So you block with this plus a 6, which is something Levia is normally doing to upkeep her graveyard, and all of a sudden you're going to get an extra damage on your next attack. And this is something really interesting as well for how aggro decks normally trade with Levia. Filling graveyard means you tend to slow down, right? If you're blocking with more cards, sure, it fills your graveyard, but that means you're not actually presenting above rate damage. You're kind of at the floor of 3 block value. But Apex Bonebreaker, because it's a temper piece, lets you fill your graveyard with equipment pieces, which means you can use more cards aggressively and still maintain a pretty healthy graveyard. So this card is just absolutely fantastic. And because of that +1 breakpoint, it means you kind of want to push back into using hit effect cards like Command and Conquer, which we'll see later in the sideboard. But the normal equipment suite we're really looking at then is the Scowling Flesh Bag, the Carrion Husk, and the Scabskin Leathers for just all the block in the freaking world. There are a couple things you can shift around though, and that really is Spoiled Skull in the head slot and Hooves of the Shadow Beast in the leg slot versus decks where their win con is to just try to wait for you to die to blood debt. You can get so much value out of Spoiled Skull. It's an incredible card for either on-demand pulling graveyard fill, like a Tear Limb from Limb, a Blood Rush Bellow, something like that, or just fixing a hand that couldn't turn off blood debt. You pull an attack, and there you go. Hooves of the Shadow Beast also lets you get really finite control over pushing for an action point on like a Blood Rush Bellow's turn to get that extra +2 and really make Blood Rush Bellows deal +8, like attack, attack, claw, claw, right? So Hooves can be really strong in those matchups as well. And everything is actually in the February link as well. I've kind of done some light sideboarding. Like I said, it's day 0 brews here. But one thing we're still respecting even on day 0 is Kano. I've seen so much hype for Kano. Kano got 2nd place at AGE recently. He won the Battle Hardened in Orlando. So we've got Grasp, we've got Cloak, that we can run to basically run AB1, effectively Spell Void 4, and then still have Hooves to pressure. The last thing we can really do is run Gambler's Gloves over the Apex Bonebreaker into matchups like Prism and Dromai, because they still run auras, they still have Spectra, and at the end of the day, you do have those 2 weapons in Mandible Claws, so you can cheat out like really easy ways to just clear up their board with this combination still. So before we jump directly into the entire breakdown of the list, I want to highlight some of the key additions we're making with heavy hitters, and that's really across these main 3 slots in the main board. The Agile windup in the yellow slot is a really, really unique role player in Levia, where you could run some like filler yellows just to always smooth out the fact that drawing into random cards on Art of War, drawing into random cards on Blood Rush, you normally wanted them to be resource cards. So yellow is always a slot that you wanted to buff out to normally like 15 or so in Levia. So adding that yellow Agile windups in those spaces makes a lot of sense. On top of its ability to basically discard itself and generate around 3 action points at its ceiling, because you can discard this and turn on your Mandible Claws, because this itself is a 6. So you can run into these cost curves where you discard Agile Windup and then have 2 blues to Claw, because they now both have Go again. That will leave you with 2 floating into a 2-cost attack, which Levia normally played really well into along other parts of her game plan. Now you can actually lean into this 2-cost, which was already so good next to like Tear Limb from Limb, because it's really, really useful with the Claw ability from Agile Windup. So you get around 2 action points on the Claw turn itself, and then the agility token that it creates in that next turn, normally at its floor, is probably unlocking another Claw Swing, which is fine, because at the end of the day, you are the aggressor, right? You do want to convert your cards into damage before you convert them into block for the most part. Or making some kind of play like Boneyard into Swing Big. Off the back of the agility itself, you don't have to worry about Scabskins, which is freaking fantastic. So turn 0, this is great. Also, the fact that you can just chuck it from your hand directly into your graveyard also comes up in some spots, because Levia does need to manage your graveyard, and the more you can just draw into abilities to fix that problem, the better. Next, we've got Smashback Ailhorn. In a similar sense, this is a blue slot that you can just burn, kind of like how Barraging Beatdown was in the list previously. There was some Intimidate shenanigans that could come up in trying to close out a game with like Dread Screamer, Barraging Beatdown into a 1-cost, but Smashback Ailhorn has this ability to not only impact your current turn, but also your next turn, and it doesn't seem like it's really doing much on the current turn, but you have to remember that graveyard fill from hand can be super crucial. So this is just now another card you can burn directly into graveyard. If it's turn 0, right, even better. You can basically like park this in Arsenal, it's always free to play out, and then play it exactly when you need to manage your graveyard a bit better into a sweeping turn because of the agility and might creation. So I've really, really been liking this card. Jury's out on whether or not blocking with 2 is ever really better than playing it, but generally I've been trying to play it just because testing says you want to actually see what your cards do, right? But you do have to note that it is a 2-block instead of a 3. And then lastly, Bonebreaker Bellow Blue has been a really interesting addition in the blue base, but one of the things it's doing is actually unlocking Beast Within as a power card in your pitch stack. Because normally, Beast Within would sometimes come up as a resource card, but once you pitched it into your deck, there really wasn't too much you were doing with that card. In second cycle, it was just a bit of a block 3, and that was about it. In fact, it could kind of clunk up your hands that didn't have targeted discard anymore, because normally first cycle you're just tearing through your blood rushes. So Bonebreaker Bellow actually gives you a way now to discard a second cycle Beast Within and absolutely pop off, with Claws now being active, with a buff, with that card draw, with Blood Debt being off. You don't really need to focus too hard on getting this combo to work. It's pretty natural that you're pitching in the blue Boneyard, the blue Bonebreaker, you're pitching in the Beast Within, and first cycle it's really just a blue block 3. But I've quite liked what it's doing to unlock really wide turns out of a blue base. So all that being said, I really want to focus on 2 costs as a curve that works even better now with the Agile windups. Tear Limb for Limb was already doing something pretty incredible with the 2 costs, but now with Agile windups specifically, the early game plays of Swing Big have really never felt better, along with a fully fleshed out line of the Hungering Slaughter Beasts and the Writhing Beasthawks. And Writhing Beasthawk has something to be said for it now with Apex Bonebreaker. The ability to give this a might and then come in for 7 dominate is It doesn't sound like a lot, but your opponent now has to worry about these endgame scenarios where you just have so much guaranteed damage, either through the Writhing Beastalk or the eventual Reckless Swing type of scenario. So just filling out the 2 cost feels quite good right now. Then you've got Dread Screamers, which are always a fantastic 2 cost just because of what they do next to 1 costs. Speaking of the 1 cost, we then have the Boneyard Marauders and the Slithering Shadowpedes. Now, these are actually the only 1 costs I'm running in the deck. I'm not running the Graveling Growl right now. That's kind of where the Agile Windup is. And this is still testing, so I'm kind of running 3 of everything that I want to try out right now. There's a real possibility that it ends up being, you know, some 2-ofs here and there, because the Graveling Growl is a quite powerful slot for the deck, and it could just be that running like 1 red Graveling is a little bit better because you've got the hooves in certain matchups that just guarantees you now throw a 1 cost 7 right on demand, which could be strong. And then finally, to wrap up the reds, is the Endless Maw, which is just so fantastic. 2-card 9, right? So then in the yellows, like I said, we have the Agile Windups that really want to work for that blue 2 cost curve. You're actually about, I think it's like 35% to draw double blues, and then if you're parking a 2 cost in Arsenal, you're basically saying anytime you draw into the Agile Windup, that's when this play is getting pulled off. So you've got some extra 2 costs in the Mark the Beast, which also have synergy with the discards in your deck. It's kind of a weird slot between this and Hungering Slaughter Beast, but I've started to prefer Mark of the Beast mainly because I'm not siding out all of these types of cards into Dash anymore. I am trying a bit of a different sideboard than just fatiguing out the Dash, and Mark has felt marginally better than the Hungering Slaughter Beast just because it's guaranteed you always turn off Blood Debt with this kind of card in hand. Then you've got the Beast Withins, which, like I said, have an actual game plan in pitch stack now, which is something I see so many people in the League of Leviathan complain about, where it's like, is Beast Within really that good? It's only if you get lucky next to a Blood Rush Bellow. Let me tell you, that is already such a ceiling that I want these cards in the deck every time, but genuinely with a pitch stack next to a blue that can target discard a Beast Within, that draws you into another blue like Wreck-A-Romp, that turns off Blood Debt, oh, this card feels incredible right now. Then we've got the Blood Rush Bellows, of course. Blood Rush Bellow, what can you say? Right now with the agility tokens as well, you can lead into these turns where you got to remember, if an agility has cracked, you want to lead with an attack first and get these 4 wide Blood Rushes off. Not saying it's like any easier now, but you just have to remember those little pieces do come up. Then we've got the Art of Wars, which right now actually feel like they do a little bit more for the deck because not every hand actually wants to discard Agile Windup, so that can sometimes just be fodder that Art of War is banishing away, or if you draw into it, like it's still a card you can throw on a turn like the Art of War for just a 2-card 6. So Art of War feels like it's actually doing quite a bit to blend these synergies together of a deck that's like not all about turning off Blood Debt, that has some early game plays, that is focusing on discard here and there. Art of War is what can still make all those pieces sing. Next, we've got the blue base, and I did already talk about Smashback Ailhorn. This really took the slot of the Barraging Beatdown, and I do really prefer the upside of the Agility and Might right now, especially because I was seeing some discussion around Agility Windup Blue, and I think this card is just strictly better before you start running Agility Windup Blue. So I would still keep trying this for quite a while before I go back to just a blue block 3, but Barraging is still nice to have as backup. Then we've got the Bone Breaker Bellows, and as we saw, we went through the yellows, right? And I did not have Shaden Death Hydra. And that's really because, the blues getting switched around with this Bone Breaker play with that, discard on Beast Within for this wide late game that you can set up in pitch stack is actually a little bit easier to pull off than something like Convulsions into Shaden Death Hydra, because that was always a 5-card play, which was a little ambitious to just assume always worked in an endgame. It, most of the time, I think, could get pulled off, especially if your opponent was committed to completely blocking you out. But now you have other ways in the pitch stack to really still deal damage. And that's going to be shown off primarily in the sideboard, which we'll get to in a second. But Blue Dread Screamer is still a pretty critical piece in what you're doing in blues to still go wide. And even in first cycle, Dread Screamer, just the go again into 1 costs, or the fact that you can block with this and then flip Consumed and just be able to pull Dread Screamers is still quite strong. 4 is always a breakpoint. Pushing your opponents to 1 is actually pretty easy. You gotta remember the Writhing Beast Hulk with Apex type of play. Like, that can force life thresholds, right? Then we've got the Tear Limb from Limb, which I'm still such a massive fan of. I really feel like this unlocked the way that I really want to play Levia, where you can build blue heavy and now actually have payoffs into drawing multiple blues. Tear Limb from Limb was step 1 of that, but now the Agile Windup is another way to have payoff for drawing multiple blues. So this card still absolutely impresses me, and the ceiling of it, you gotta remember, is like not quite there with the Shaden, but going Claw into Swing Big coming in for 16, like 19 damage on that kind of play, right, is still pretty nutso. So we're keeping these in for now. Then we've got some of the boring blue inclusions like Blue Deadwood Rumbler and the Blue Wrecker Romps, just blue 6s, right? And then the one-ofs, I have a Signed by Soyame. Look at that. Doomsday, that was picked up by a friend of mine, George, at the Sea Throne recently. So that's pretty sick. I had never gotten a Soyame signature before, so it's really cool to see it in the flesh. And then we have Soul Harvest as well as the Reckless Swing to round things out. So actually, in this list, all 3 of these one-of blues got significantly better, because the Reckless Swing now, with having extra access to dominate in the 3 copies of Writhing, with a little bit of more force damage with Apex Bonebreaker on top of those, Reckless Swing can be a real threshold that your opponent just has no say about. You just put them at 2, and then you know you win, inevitably with Reckless, which is quite strong. Then in the sideboard, you'll see I actually have gone back to a little bit of recursion, and Soul Harvest is always good at actually cleaning out those recursion pieces so that you can launch them right into next turn and actually, you know, still come in for a 3-card 12. It's quite good rate. Now, the last thing to mention is that Doomsday really did get a sideways buff out of this set. So normally it's very hard to interact with allies in any way. You can't attack react them, right? But you actually can trigger Might. And I'm trying to find my agility token, but you'll have to believe me for now. Okay, here we go. Might and agility tokens actually do trigger on allies, because they read, at the start of your turn, destroy this, then your next attack this turn gains go again. Your next attack this turn gains +1. And Blasmafet itself is just an attack. So the ability to just blow people out of the water if Blasmafet sticks has never been higher, because now Might and Agility are affecting this sucker, so you can have scenarios where your opponent thinks they're going to throw everything at your face, you block 3 cards, block with Apex, now you can come in for 7 with Blasmafet, turn off Blood Debt with that last card in your hand, and your opponent, might be in a situation where they have to give you 3 cards now. Is that 1-card hand ever going to kill Blasmafet? Heck no, and then you buy momentum completely back into the game. So this is just so cool to see those interactions finally affect allies like this. So then that was actually 57 cards in this kind of core that I'm testing. And reminder, like I said, this is still day 0 stuff. I have about 40 games on Talishar and maybe about another 20 or so spectating other people on the Runaways team trying to play Levia in this early season. But 57 cards is about the core, so we're working with these sideboard packages that try to answer a little bit about what our opponents are doing to us. And so the Command and Conquers are really if our opponent is trying to race us down. If their game plan is to race us, then we want to race them back. And one thing that is absolutely disruptive to things like Azalea and Katsu is when you come in with Command and Conquer anyway. But your ability to come in with Command and Conquers for 7 now, because of the Might token off of Apex Bonebreaker, is insane. Present a 7 attack Command and Conquer into your Blasmafet flip turn. Oh my god, incredible. So yeah, CNC has never felt better, and you have to remember, adding in these attacks that don't turn off Blood Debt have actual use mid-game, so if you can really protect your life threshold before you flip into the Demi-Hero, then putting this in Arsenal can actually be part of your game plan and not a punt. So yeah, this card feels quite good right now, and like I said, the sideboard stuff is all on the Fabry link. Then the next package we've got are for the decks that try to block you to win, or fish for their own kind of like late game combo pieces, the slow decks, right? Guardian specifically, it really folds to this, and that's just a little peppering of recursion. Howl from Beyond has always been an incredible card in just letting you manage Graveyard. Deep-Rooted Evil has great Art of War synergy, and previously used to seem like a card that, okay, to get full value of, you gotta roll Scabs and keep it blue. That's like such a greedy way to play the game. But now you can just keep Deep-Rooted Evil parked in your banish zone, wait for when you know on your follow-up turn you're going to have an agility because of some of your agility creators, so you just keep a blue. And now you've got a 1-card 6 that you get to throw because of those agility tokens. It's crazy. So really, like, just keep this thing parked. And then 1-card 6. Even if it only happens like once per game, that's probably enough. Twice per game, insane. 3 times, you're winning, right? And then a Shadow of Blasphemfet, because this is effectively like the second copy of either one of these. It can try to fetch out whichever piece you need a little bit earlier, which generally I would say early game, you want to just fetch out the Howl, or if you need to turn off Blood Debt, then go ahead, fetch out the Deep-Rooted, right? But this one doesn't hurt too bad to draw if you've got like an Art of War parked in Arsenal. This one doesn't hurt too bad to draw, like, not with like a Blood Rush drawing into this, that still sucks, but just drawing it naturally, blocking 2, is still fine. So that's like the second 3-card package. And then lastly, we've got these Smashing Performances, which I'm running right now mostly because into Mech, I'm not able to do the full fatigue plan that I was running previous, but having some item disruption that's maintaining this aggressive pressure that the deck is trying to uphold, I think is a little bit better than using Arg Smash right now. So it's still 6 energies, right? So you're really looking to either play these out early game or combo them with like an Art of War turn or this on your flip turn, so you don't have to worry too much about the fact that they don't turn off Blood Debt. But these are still yellows, so that is still flexible with all the 2 costs in your list. They're really not the worst things. And then that's pretty much everything I have set in stone for how I've been playing the deck in this early tier day 0 environment. But that's only 78 cards. So the last 2 cards I've been testing with a little bit, but really have like no practice with, would be adding back 1 Pulping, which I always really did like into Dromai. 1 Pulping to just slam into a Miragai always felt quite good because regardless of whether it hit or missed, you've now cleared their dragon and have go again. So 1 Pulping is probably fine. And then similarly, a Ghostly Visit, when you're adding some of that recursion package, does feel quite good into Dromai as well, because this also at a 4 breakpoint can kill Miragais. And you are going to take Gamblers into that matchup, so you can cheat some Ghostly value, hopefully a couple times in a game, which does feel pretty good as well. So as for some other early brewings with Levia, I have gone through the gamut of all the different agility generators and trying to balance which ones really make sense for the deck. So I have tried a lot of these other cards. I just wanted to touch on them real quick. Blue Agile Windup I did talk about a little bit before, in that I wouldn't run this card over Smashback Alehorn. They're very similar cards in that all you're doing is like graveyard filling with them or blocking 2 with them. And Smashback Alehorn also gives you the benefit of that Might token. And damage, I'm just saying, like 1 damage here or there, especially since you do run the CNCs in some matchups or like the Writhings, is a big deal. So if you want a lot of that, if you want like redundancy around that effect, then I could see you adding the Blue Agile Windups, but like I said, not before the Smashback in my book. You can't convince me turn 0 happens enough for you to want to run this card. If turn 0 is all you plan for, then you should be running triple Nourishing Emptiness in every deck, right? Then we've got some of the other agility generators. Lead with Speed was one I tried for a while because this does fit the cost curve of all those 2 attacks, right? You keep a blue to then lead with Speed into a 2 cost. At first felt okay, but the issue with being so proactive around creating an agility token in a situation where like you obviously like kept this hand to play it, right? Like you kept this red to play it out. You didn't block with it because it was only a 2. It wasn't a flexible card like the Smashback where you can at least like use it as your blue pitch if you're in kind of a tight spot. You're always keeping this card to play it, but then you aren't sure if that agility token actually gets value, which you could say happens with like all of the agility tokens, but this one specifically felt like the one that had to get cut because the red is just such a taxing spot for a Levia deck. You don't want to draw into reds on Blood Rush or your damage just absolutely falls off. So that's really where like the red lead with speed started to fumble a little bit for me. And then similarly, you've got like these other reds that can try to make agility. Take It on the Chin is interesting because you could sideboard this into Kano, basically, right? Like this is some damage prevention that then makes you an agility. So I could see it there, but not really above any of the other ones. Test of Agility. These black cards are just so awkward for Levia. Levia is already a deck whose hands and arsenal are like a very delicate balance, and Test of Agility doesn't quite work with most of it. And Levia can also have situations where you just have so much momentum, your opponent blocks out, and then what are you doing when you draw this kind of card? You can't even arsenal it. So Not a fan of that one. And then Clash of Agility, a red slot that you just can't quite afford in the deck, and you aren't that high attack to always win clashes either. Like, you know, you peak at 8 since this list isn't running Shade and Death Hydra with Swing Big, but generally it's like 6 or a miss. So I'm not going to like bank my turn on blocking with this assuming that the clash hits. So this one didn't quite feel good enough either. As for some other cards, you know, there are these agility synergy pieces like Runner, but because agility isn't like central to your deck, you're not trying to make agility every turn. It kind of just comes up when it comes up and then has these highs, but for the most part just fits like a simple cost curve of like, okay, this yellow will just turn into 3 damage now because it will pay for a claw. Runner like wants you to build your deck around more consistent agility synergies, and once again it's a red that doesn't turn off Blood Debt. It's nice that it's a 6, nice that it blocks 3, but I just couldn't really work it in to this build. Similarly, Send Packing doesn't do anything to turn off Blood Debt, but it is in a yellow slot, so it's not fighting with the reds, and you could say that this effect is kind of like CNC in yellow, so like why is that not better than running CNC, right? Well, CNC still can just get paid for by a yellow, and if you've played Levia enough, you know for a fact you don't always draw the blue, and sometimes the clumping of your yellow power cards need to pay into something to kind of get you over that hump of the game. So being able to pay for CNC with like, you know, an Art of War so you can buy some room to set the Blood Rush that you kind of double drew are really, really important pieces of play that Send Packing doesn't actually help you do. And then No Fear. This card, I wanted to really like it, but even with Brian Gottlieb whispering in my ear when I was out there in New Zealand about this card actually being good for Levia, I tried it. I played so many games with No Fear, and oh my god, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. You could run it at few copies, but then if you found it post-consumed, it's just like a red block 2, because anything you banish would be face down after consumed, so that was bad. If you ran it in heavier copies so you could find it pre-consumed, Levia still had all these hands that, you know, they're just not full 6s, right? Like you're generally maybe drawing like 2 6s in a hand, the rest of your deck is a lot more varied than that. So No Fear just wasn't ever really getting the nuts value that it's supposed to if you arsenal it and then come in and like block for 6 off of No Fear. That just didn't happen across like maybe 10 games or so that I played with it. So I just wasn't sold on what this card was really doing, and it's not even good into Wizard because this would be on your own turn, like, right, Wizard's trying to kill you on your own turn. Normally you're presenting lethal when Kano tries to go off, and you're presenting lethal by spending your cards. So then all No Fear realistically would do is maybe block 2 in that scenario, and if that's what you're doing, then, you know, you might as well tech like these kind of cards instead. So yeah, just not all too impressed with No Fear, unfortunately, but that's okay. There's a lot more to do with Levia still. Like I said, this is about as day 0 as you can get. Pre-release hasn't even happened, but I am incredibly stoked for what Levia looks like. I'm telling you, those might and agility tokens synergizing with Blasphemfet alone is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and the added ability to just keep getting proactive graveyard fill in ways that benefits the deck is something Levia will never take for granted. So I'm having a lot of fun. I've gotten a lot of people reaching out and asking, hey, is Levia actually the best deck? Hey, can you coach us a little bit? Hey, can you share your deck list? I figured I'd go ahead and just make this video for everyone so people can start somewhere. I don't expect this to be the final build by any means, especially since I'm not going to be playing in much this season. I'm going to be streaming, baby. But I'm having a lot of fun, and hopefully you do too. Here we go. We've got a match into Boltyn, and actually, you know, it was pretty hard to pair up into someone not on the new hero, so we're going to go with this Boltyn game, even though it's pretty short. But this is just to show off what the hand textures with all of the new cards really look like. So we've got a turn 0 here with a really interesting choice, because you'd think this is fantastic. Just Agile Windup, Smashback, Ailhorn, why not? But the problem with that would be getting stuck with an arsenal card that wouldn't really do anything. So instead of getting double agility, since that actually doesn't work, we're just going to go ahead and arsenal the Smashback Ailhorn, because like I said in the deck tech, it's really on-demand graveyard fill from your arsenal, and also a little bit of an opportune way to go ahead and set up exactly when you have momentum to just keep it going with an agility into the next turn. So that in arsenal should feel a little comfortable at this point. Our hand really wants to just go ahead and launch the Art of War, because Slithering Shadowpede is just a combo you absolutely do not want to ignore. And we also will have the exact amount of graveyard we really need to worry about for this kind of play already set up, because the Shadowpede and the Art of War would get our graveyard to 3. We don't really even need to play at the Smashback Ailhorn if we assume our hand is just going to be slithering into the Endless Maw. So we go ahead and eat the Boltyn's damage here, which, I mean, 3-card 8, not fantastic. You know, they're not sitting on Soul. They only got an Arsenal out of the end of that turn. So our hand does end up being a little bit better than we expected, because we drew into the resources needed to go ahead and now just launch the Endless Maw with a new Arsenal card, having played out the Smashback Ailhorn to give us those tokens into next turn. So the Agility and Might has a little bit of synergy with a 2-cost, right? You're kind of hoping to find a 1-cost to make it that clean, but there are still other ways to go about using that kind of momentum, even if it's just for an extra claw swing. So the hand texture here is also a little bit awkward. You know, the Smashback Ailhorns, you got to remember, the only other thing they were really fighting to be would be a blue barraging beatdown. So if you're going to burn out that kind of card in this hand, it would be the same no matter what it was. So we're going to go ahead and try on the Blood Rush spell. It was a little bit of a greedy play, but we do have a guaranteed way to already turn off Blood Debt and get an attack through with that Mark of the Beast in Arsenal. So I went ahead and did it, but really not the cleanest play. That turn would have been totally fine. Just Mark the Beast into Swing Big, Arsenal the Blood Rush, and wait for a better hand texture to really send that flying. But, you know, we went for it. Sometimes you get rewarded, sometimes you don't. There is absolutely the ceiling of drawing into a way to really abuse the agility as well. So that's really what I was trying to do, to show off for the camera a little bit more. But now we draw into a hand that really would have loved to have had an agility token, so we're lining up things not too well. If we think back on that last turn, maybe instead of blocking with the Dread Screamer, I could have just eaten that damage and played out the Smashback Ailhorn, so that on this turn as well, I would have had the agility token, finally finding that 2-cost into 1-cost. That would have been oh so perfect. So we're stumbling a little bit, but one of the really cool things that happens when you stumble is you can fall back on your armor, and your armor isn't just life anymore. Apex Bonebreaker gives you attack now. So you saw me do that on the last turn cycle, where the hand wasn't too great, but now I'm starting to pump the numbers by just presenting a 2-card 8 back at the opponent, which, sure, that's not the 2-card 9 of an Endless Maw, but you're getting pretty darn close. And we're going to do that again back to back, because not every game do you actually get to wait for an opportunity to line it up with the CNCs. This is one of those games where it's really not really happening. So we present what we present, deny the Lumina on hits, and just come back to back with these turns. We had a pretty strong start into not a great Blood Rush, we're not going to lie, but then into 2-card 8, into 2-card 8, while still having quite a bit of armor in play. Now, not going to lie, this block is a little embarrassing. Don't look too hard at it. In my head, they were just always going to snaps on this kind of hand because they were quite behind, but I'd go ahead and just give them a pretty free block here. So don't do that, people. This was clearly wrong. If anything, I could have just taken that damage and then kept the whole hand to just go Dread Screamer into Swing Big. That would have been totally fine, and actually would have taken less damage than I did that turn cycle for pulling off that same play. So not super clean there, but that's okay. We keep going. This just ended up being a blue Dread Screamer into the Slithering Shadowpede, which is a decent curve, and then we Arsenal that Swing Big, mostly in the hopes that it's going to be our flip turn. We're going to go ahead, use our armor and our hand to mostly block down, take a little bit of damage if we need to, into presenting Swing Big into flip, which is really strong at this point because our opponent is at 8, so Swing Big would demand an answer straight up. So that was kind of the game plan, but the way that we draw into our hand is going to force it to go a little bit different. We're going to miss the flip, but we can go more aggressive with this hand, and a Swing Big in Arsenal with these Art of Wars still sounds pretty good. And there actually is a world where the Blood Rush is also live to get thrown as well. After this Art of War pitches Art of War, we'll kind of see what happens. It was a little bit greedy to say go again. If I just said +1, then I'm really leaning into the Blood Rush being my attack that turn. If I say go again, then I'm more so saying maybe my turn is just attack into Arsenal the Blood Rush. So I'm not entirely sure if I called that one incorrectly, but I do end up wasting the go again in this scenario. I just go ahead and present the Swing Big. This is the way to present the most damage. I could have also played out the Doomsday, which would have been a little bit less damage, but then sticking this 6 power ally on the board, right? It's a little bit weaker into Boltyn though, because they do have Celestial Cataclysm, and there is enough soul for him to just 1 card answer the Doomsday. So I'm not really going for that line. You don't need it to win. I've got all this momentum. Let's just make sure I don't lose to Blood Debt, put an attack that turns it off in Arsenal, and then keep going. So our graveyard's absolutely healthy enough to go for this kind of line with a 6 graveyard banish of the Dread into the Boneyard. We're still healthy to keep going off the back of that. But you will notice in these scenarios, because I'm not running Gamblers, I don't just keep a large hand in this kind of game state and roll Scabs. I don't want to put the game up to a die roll where I have no protection from it. I know that if I keep taking all the cards from my opponent, I'm eventually going to draw into the Agile Windups or the Smashback Alehorns that let me convert a larger hand into damage enough to close. Tear Limb for Limb is a very similar card in that regard, and that's basically what happens to close out the game here. We get that beautiful curve of Claw into Swing Big, 19 damage to close the game. Not quite 26 like on a Hydra, but it's good enough to get the job done.